Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, we are going to be diving into the topic of feeding small children. And I want to share with you guys all of my tips as a registered dietitian who specializes in intuitive eating, how to kind of get your kids to eat everything. So first, I just want to say that feeding kids, whether young kids or old kids, it is a big job. They need 3 meals a day. God knows how many snacks they ask for. And if it feels like it's hard, that's because it is hard. And also, as parents and caregivers, we really have the power to kind of shape how our kids see food and view food and how they eat. So I want to share with you guys just all of my knowledge when it comes to this department. I do have 3 small children, currently 3 and under, and 2 of them, eat normal 3 meals a day, snacks, all of that. The other one is just a little guy. He still just gets milk. But I've had a fair amount of experience now over the past several years, just figuring out, using my knowledge, but then also using like the reality of parenthood and how things fly on a day-to-day to really shape my view on how to do this. And I have a lot of those tips to share with you. So when it comes to feeding my young kids, I have 3 main goals in mind. First, I want to make sure that I provide them as best I can a varied diet and avoid pickiness. Second, I just want to avoid being a short order cook. I want to cook a meal and that's what the family eats and the buck stops there. I don't want to be creating special meals every night or every day. That's just a lot of extra work and it's not really necessary. And 3, I really want to raise intuitive eaters. I want to have children that can listen to their own body and their own cues and use that as their guide on how to eat instead of external rules or maybe influence or coaxing from me. Now, we are all born with the ability to regulate our intake based on hunger and fullness. And then as we get older, hunger and fullness, but also taking our natural food desires into account. And we can do this actually very well. However, when we are young children, it is very common to get coached out of this ability or coached away from using our own cues. For example, if you were like me growing up, you often heard from your parents when you finished your plate or cleaned your plate, "Good job, like you cleaned your plate. I'm so glad that you ate all your food," really praising the amount that we ate, really putting a focus on finishing the plate, not really taking into account how full I may have felt or if I was really needing all of that food at that moment or if I was satisfied with that amount. You often hear, or maybe you do this yourself, which it's totally okay if you do, I'm not judging, and that is using things like, "I want you to take 3 more bites of your broccoli," or 2 more bites of your chicken, or "Can you just take, 1 more bite for me?" This coaxing and coaching kids to eat more often coaches them right out of those fullness cues. And also, as parents or caregivers, we can really pass on or train our kids to see food the way that we do. So if we are someone who, or if you are someone who does not see food as neutral, for example, you'll say, "Oh, that's really good for you," or "That's really bad for you," and you kind of put food in different groups, good and bad. You're applying morality to food. You will teach your kids to do the same thing. And also if you're putting food on a pedestal, like, you can have a cookie if you do something really good. You're basically making that cookie extra special. You're making it above all other foods because you're putting it on this pedestal and you're creating a reward out of it, which can put extra attention on those foods, which can lead to unhealthier habits later down the line as far as eating those foods and feeling control around those foods and things like that. Now, I think it's super important to note that all of this comes from a well-meaning place. When parents are just trying to get their kids to eat a few more bites or coaxing them to eat the broccoli so that they can have their dessert. These are not, you're not trying to teach your kids unhealthy habits. You're trying to get your kid to eat. You want them to grow. You want them to develop. You want them to be nourished. So this all really comes from a good place. However, it can backfire and have negative consequences on your child's relationship with food. This is super important to know, okay, parents, so I want you to listen up. Studies show that toddlers and young children, they will regulate their intake on their own over time. It is not something that you need to be concerned with, which you may think, I feel very concerned with my toddler's intake, and I feel you on that, because sometimes they eat a ton and you're like, yay, they're getting all the calories they need. They're going to be able to grow, they're going to be able to be nourished. And then other times they will pick at their food, they'll barely eat anything. And often this roller coaster happens in one single day. They'll eat a ton at breakfast, a little bit at lunch, hardly any at dinner. And this is totally normal. I want you to release the expectation that you have to get a certain amount of food in your kid at every meal or at every eating experience. You need to release that control and give it back to them, because if just left to their own devices, sometimes they'll eat a ton, sometimes they'll eat very little, but in the end, research shows that it will all even out, and it's not something that we really need to heavily monitor and manage. So it is actually very critical for you as a parent or a caregiver, if you really want to foster a positive relationship with food and allow your child to continue to eat intuitively, which again, this is an ability that they're born with. It is so critical that you actually don't meddle in the eating, experience at all, and that you trust that your child is going to eat what they need, they're going to get the calories that they need, and they're going to get the nourishment that they need, as long as you are providing foods that will give them nourishment. So now I want to move into more of like the practical mealtime tips, my philosophy, how to actually apply this information in real time to feeding your children. And that all starts off with my basic philosophy that I actually learned from a woman named Ellen Satter. I learned about her way back when I was in undergrad studying nutrition, and she is an excellent resource when it comes to feeding in the childhood years and raising intuitive eaters. She is excellent, and she has this phrase, I provide, you decide, or I provide, they decide. And this is exactly how I approach feeding my kids in a nutshell. So as the parent, I control what they get. I control what is offered to them food-wise, so what they get for their meals, what they get for their snacks, and then when we're out and about in the world, to a certain extent, I can still control what is offered to them. Not completely, and that is actually not my goal, because I want them to be exposed to all things, and I want them to, not see me freak out over a certain food choice or put a lot of emphasis on a certain maybe bad food choice that they encounter out in the world. I want food to remain neutral. But since most of our meals and snacks come from inside of the home, I am basically very much in control in what's offered to them. However, the caveat here is I am not in control of how much they eat and what exactly they eat from what I offer. Speaking of small children, Bo has officially joined the chat. That's my 3-month-old. He is with us now, so if you hear some babbling, that's just him. The next part of my philosophy, if you will, is just to not meddle at all in the eating experience. So, not coaxing them to eat a few more bites, not saying good job or praising them for eating a lot, or maybe scolding them for eating too little. Just basically letting the eating experience happen and just kind of being a bystander to it. I also don't, use food as a way to get another food. So for example, eat your peas so that you can have, cake after dinner. We also don't just automatically have dessert after dinner. That may be part of what you do as a culture, as a family. It's just not something that we do. It's not something that I grew up doing. So I don't often find myself in this weird situation where I really want them to eat their nourishing dinner. But I know that they're probably holding out for dessert. That's just not part of like our regular eating experience. We do offer sweets. My kids definitely have like sweets and baked goods and things like that, but they're not like a given. They're just kind of something that they have here and there. I also don't try and force trying like a new food. New foods to kids can be very overwhelming. They can be scary, and they, might not want to eat it. And they often have to be introduced several, and I mean many times to a new food before that they'll fully accept it as something that they enjoy eating. So I don't put any foods on a pedestal. I don't bring a lot of attention to the new eggplant that's on their plate that I really want them to try, and I don't coax them to try it. I may explain that like, oh yeah, you've never had that before, like feel free to try it. And if they don't like it, I just say, oh well, thank you for trying it, and that's it, and we move on. We don't put a lot of emphasis on it. Now there are definitely some things that come up that I want to kind of shed some light on or share how I would approach it coming from this frame of mind. So for example, if your kid says, I don't like this, or I don't want to eat it, I definitely hear it. I'm sure you do too. First and foremost, don't take it personally. It's definitely easy, especially with like dinner after a long day, when you make this really nice meal and they're just like, I don't want to eat it. And you're like, I just slaved over this and made you a really nice, nutritious, nourishing, delicious dinner, and you're gonna eat it. You know, it's very easy to take it personally, but don't take it personally. It has nothing to do with your cooking. It has nothing to do, I mean, it really has nothing to do with you. It's them, not you. And next is just to have a really neutral response. If my daughter, my oldest, she's almost 4, says, you know, I don't like this, I just say, okay, well, you don't have to eat it. And I leave it at that. If she continues to say it over and over, I might just kind of ignore it. Half the time I think she's doing it more so, honestly, just for like attention, not that she doesn't want the food. So I just kind of let it slide. If she's really adamant about it, then I just, you know, reiterate, okay, you don't have to eat it if you don't want to. And again, we just kind of stop it there. Another thing you may come across is if they're just not eating very much. Maybe it's dinner time and they're just not really touching their food, and that worry starts to creep in of like, I don't want you to go to bed hungry. I don't want you to be, you know, asking for a snack when we're in the middle of doing our bedtime routine. You know, I want you to have a full belly so that you can have a good night's sleep. So if I have a child that is not eating very much of their dinner and I feel that it is more so maybe due to like distraction, maybe she's like getting up out of her chair and running around, she's not really focused on dinner, I will probably remind her that, you know, that just so you know, this is your opportunity to eat. So if you want to fill your belly, now is the time to do so. But otherwise, you know, if she's not eating very much, I just kind of respect it. I take that as she's trusting her body to know that she doesn't want to eat. Again, if you think it's because she's just super distracted or he's super distracted, then maybe you'll, you know, say something to kind of refocus them in a very neutral way. But for the most part, I just respect it. I leave it alone. I don't get involved, and I just trust them. You can also offer that they can have that meal or some of that meal a little bit later on when they're feeling more hungry. And I say this so that you don't get into this trap of your kid avoids eating. You know, they don't want to eat because they know that you'll give them a snack later that they like better. Kids are really smart. If you have toddlers, you know that they learn to play you so quick. They are so smart, and they will learn that they can get you to give them, you know, like applesauce or like a chocolate chip bar or, you know, some kind of snack that they really, really like. That they can get you to give them that later so that they're not hungry instead of eating this dinner now that they maybe aren't super jazzed about. So if they really refuse to eat, you can just say like, okay, that's fine. You know, if you're hungry later, you can have this later. Not if you're hungry later, you know, I'm going to give you a snack that you prefer so that you don't kind of fall into that cycle of them avoiding eating so that they can later get the snack that they really want. And then they're missing out on, you know, nutrition from that meal. You're kind of moving towards pickiness for them, guiding what is offered to them instead of you guiding what's offered to them. And that brings me to my third and possibly most important part of my philosophy, and that is not making special meals. I know that it is so easy to just be like, fine, what do you want? You know, it's very easy to fall into the trap or the mindset of, well, they have to eat something, you know, I have to get something in them. But I want you to avoid that thinking completely, because again, you provide, they decide. It is not your responsibility to make sure that they eat. It is your responsibility to make sure that you offer food to them, but whether or not they eat it and what they eat from what you offer is completely their responsibility. I know that that can feel like a big baton to pass to a very small human, but trust me when I say they do have the ability to regulate their own intake. We just need to give them the room to do so. By making special meals for kids, they're going to learn real fast that all they have to do is just, you know, maybe complain a little, throw a little tantrum, you know how kids are, to get you to make that special meal. So the downsides of making special meals, one is it increases the workload. You are likely increasing pickiness, because if kids can choose, you know, if they're the ones in control of what's being offered to them, they're probably not going to be choosing like vegetables and, you know, things that have weird textures but maybe offer a lot of nutrition. They're just going to want to stick to the the most basic tasty things like pasta and chicken nuggets, and who can blame them? Those things are delicious, but as parents, at least for me, it's really important for me to expose my kids to a lot of food, to try and create this varied diet. And of course, it's going to take them a long time to get on board with a lot of foods that are being introduced to them, but I am just focused on providing those foods, and whether or not they eat them, I kind of release myself of that responsibility. And along with creating special meals that typically are more basic kid-friendly foods, let's say, you may be sacrificing a lot of nutrition. So if they only ever want to eat pasta and chicken nuggets and that's it, like that is literally all you can get them to eat. Again, I am certainly not judging by any means, because I know how kids can be and I know how hard it is. But you're certainly not getting a ton of nourishment in when you maybe could be if they were eating all sorts of meals that you're cooking for the whole family, if that makes sense. I do just kind of want to throw in the disclaimer that I fully recognize that there are certain maybe health conditions or disorders that really affect kids in this area, and that can really lead to picky eating. That is kind of a different situation that I feel like can be approached a little bit differently. I'm more so speaking in general terms with just typical eating behaviors in children. Another really big point in my philosophy is food neutrality and not passing on morality of food to my kids. So not referring to things as just good and bad. I really try to avoid putting foods on a pedestal. So putting like really big limits maybe on sugary baked goods will really increase your kids' attention to that food. It will make them want it even more because it's so restricted and off limits. So I really try to avoid doing that. But the same goes for healthy foods too. If you're always saying how good these foods are and you really need to be eating these, it's so important that you eat these because they're good for you and because they're going to help you grow, and you make a really big deal out of it, it can actually backfire and make kids, they're rebellious. It can make them not want it. So it's just food neutrality in general for healthier, more nutrient dense foods, as well as foods that maybe provide less nutrient content and maybe more sugar or ingredients that maybe you don't love. Now, to share kind of a real world example of how I approach this, for example, if my daughter really wants a cookie, okay, have a cookie if it's an appropriate time to have a cookie. And then if she wants another cookie, I may, depending on the day, I might set kind of a boundary there, or maybe I let her have another or whatever it is. But you can set boundaries with food, and you can kind of start instilling this nutritional knowledge and importance in kids, as long as it's not like do or die. So for example, if my daughter really wants like a third cookie, I'm like, that is enough cookies. Sugar makes kids absolutely crazy, and I try and avoid that when I can. So if she's asking for a third cookie, instead of me saying, no, cookies are bad for you, no more cookies, you've had too many cookies, and it being this like negative experience, I just will say, what, I don't want you to have a bellyache. Those do have a lot of sugar, and that could upset your tummy if you have too much. So I think that's probably enough for now. And then we just move along. Just a simple explanation, and you can do this with good foods too, explaining to kids in really age appropriate or understandable ways how food can nourish your body. So for example, when it comes to eating vegetables, you can talk about how that's what makes your bones strong. It helps you run faster. It helps you have more energy so that you can play all day. Again, you can like talk about food, but again, it's just not getting into that like really harping on it and making it this big deal that creates or maybe gives it more attention than it really deserves. We want to kind of stay in this food is neutral bubble, but we certainly can impart some wisdom along the way. Now, what you're probably wondering is, does this actually work for my kids? How is it going? What is my experience with doing this? And my experience overall is very, very positive with approaching food in this way when it comes to feeding my kids. So for example, sometimes they will eat a lot. Sometimes they ask for seconds. Other times, on the other end of the spectrum, they eat hardly at all. Maybe they take one bite of their food. That is definitely more rare, and I would say it really only happens at dinner time, which can be the most common, time of day for young kids to not eat very much. Because I do always try and provide with whatever meal I'm serving, I do always try and serve something I know they'll like. So maybe it is like a new kind of soup that I've never really given them before. before and it's a different flavor than they're used to. But maybe I add rice to it or pasta to it because I know that my kids are going to eat that and they're familiar with it and it will help to fill their little bellies. But I for sure see those fluctuations in intake in my kids, but they have always grown really well. They're on their growth chart. I'm not really worried about like calorie consumption because it definitely is, they're getting what they need. It just may not be like in this perfect way that makes me feel good about it every day. It might be a little bit of a roller coaster, but I just have been riding it out and so far everything has been working out really well. It is so rare in my experience that they ask for something else. I have never offered special meals to my kids, so they literally don't even ask. The only times that they might say, I really don't want this, I want something else, is if we are maybe like having dinner at someone else's house with something that they've never eaten before. It's like foreign to them and they might be a little weirded out by it at first. This literally happened just the other day. My mom cooked this like chicken and rice dish with like a creamy sauce. My girls have never had this. And they were kind of like, I don't like this. I don't know what this is. They were like weirded out by it. And my girls love ketchup. I definitely give my kids ketchup. It's certainly not perfect over here. And I was just kind of like, all right, well, how about I give you a little bit of ketchup for the chicken? And they immediately ate it right up. You know, it went from them asking like, I don't really want this, but they know that I'm not going to give them something else. They know that that is how it works in our house. So gave them a little bit of ketchup that they could dip their chicken in and they were just fine, even though it was something that they never had eaten before. And they were a little hesitant about at first. It's also rare that they are like immediately hungry after a meal, meaning they didn't eat enough. Like I said, I really just let them go. I trust that they're eating what they need at that meal for the most part. And it's very rare that we run into like they just legit didn't eat their meal when they actually were hungry and now 10 minutes later they're like really hungry and asking for a snack and now I'm frustrated. It's very, very rare that that happens. And I do want to make a note here when it comes to like snacks after meals. One of the biggest questions I get is, should I allow my kids to have a snack before bed? And I think that it really just depends on what your kid's bedtime is. For us, my kids go to bed shortly after we eat dinner. We eat dinner, we clean up the kitchen, and then we pretty much start heading up to do the nighttime routine. But if your kids are older, or maybe they are like excellent nappers that sleep for hours in the afternoon and then go to bed later, I'm kind of jealous of you. That is certainly not my kids. But you know, if there's a lot of time that lapses between when they eat dinner and when they go to bed, they might actually be hungry. So they might actually like really legitimately want a snack so that they can have a good night's sleep. So that's kind of on you as the parent to kind of feel out that situation and see if they're just trying not to eat their dinner because I know that they can hold out and you'll give them a snack instead. But if they're actually like eating their dinner and then legitimately seem hungry later on, then that's a whole nother story and I would totally give a snack in that instance. And another thing I've noticed is it's actually really rare for my kids to finish sweets. And this is probably the biggest indicator for me that I know that I am like keeping their intuitive cues intact, because no matter what, I feel like my kids view, even though I try my best to keep food as neutral, I feel like my kids view sweets as like this special treat, like this special thing, which I don't love, but it's just kind of like this influence that no matter what I do, it's just kind of comes from outside sources and it just like is what it is. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. The parent or, you know, caregiver is the one that's going to have the most influence on your kids and how their relationship with food is. But I know that she doesn't truly see this as this like off limit thing that she's never allowed to have and it's so special, because majority of the time she doesn't even finish it. So something small, like she loves a cake pop from Starbucks. Those are really small. She always polishes those off. But maybe she has like a slice of cake at a birthday party, or like a really good cookie that we got from like a store, or a little bit of candy that we got from the store. Most of the time she doesn't actually finish it. She'll just leave half of it, a third of it, whatever left, and she's over it and she moves on. So that tells me that she doesn't view this as something that is like really restricted and she needs to gobble it up now because she's never gonna have it again. That to me shows that she actually has a really positive relationship with food. She's able to have her fill, enjoy it, and then leave some there because she knows that it's going to be available at another time and it doesn't become something that's stressful. So that is my experience with approaching food in this way. And like I said, it has been very positive. Now I do want to say, if you are someone who has never really approached food this way with your kids and you're thinking, I make special meals, you know, I make all the allowances. My kids always ask for snacks because they don't eat their dinner. You know, maybe you're doing all of these like quote unquote bad things, okay? You're not doing bad things at all. Again, I'm not judging. You can change this though, okay? You can make a change and you can totally switch up the way that you do things, and your kids are probably going to protest at first, and that's okay. It is their right to protest. If they're super used to you doing something and getting special meals when they ask for them all the time, and all of a sudden you're just like, listen, I know that mommy has always, you know, made you pasta or chicken nuggets or I don't know, whatever it is that they like to eat instead of whatever you cook. I know that mommy has always done this, but you know, from here on out, I feel it's really important to mom that we all eat the same meal, and that is just what we're gonna be doing from now on. They may not like it, and you know what? Why wouldn't they not like it, honestly, if you put yourself in their shoes? Because they do probably feel really out of control, and this is something that they had control over before, and this is gonna be a big change for them. But you just have to, if it's important to you, just ride it out, and eventually it will become the norm for you guys. I just wanna say that you absolutely can do this. I believe in you. It is definitely a big change if this is not at all what you're doing now. However, it is so worth it, and it will pay dividends. I hope that you guys found this video helpful, and also if you want to hear more about feeding kids and raising intuitive eaters and my just like approach in general to feeding small children, let me know. I can certainly make more videos about this, and I would love for you to specifically let me know in the comments what you would like to learn more about when it comes to this topic. But that is all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I would love for you to join my little community here on YouTube. You can also follow me over on Instagram as well to see a more peek into my daily life. But again, that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.